I stood in the middle of my sister's wedding, wearing white, holding a sealed legal document, and announced to 200 guests that the $10 million company and every single property in our family name belonged to me. The bride dropped her bouquet, the groom's face drained of color. My parents looked like they had seen a ghost. That was the day I turned betrayal into justice. But to understand how I got there, let me take you back 3 months earlier. Before we continue, if stories like this keep you hooked, hit that subscribe button. It is free and it helps more people discover stories like mine. And tell me, would you have had the courage to walk into your sister's wedding wearing white? My name is Madison Cole. I am 30 years old and I live in Chicago. 3 months before my wedding day, I walked into my own apartment earlier than expected. I was carrying takeout from Lou Malnati's, the deep dish pizza Ethan loved. We had been together for almost 4 years, and in less than 90 days, I was supposed to marry him at the Drake Hotel overlooking Lake Michigan. But that night, instead of finding my fiancé waiting with a smile, I found his jacket thrown over the couch, heels on the floor, and the unmistakable sound of voices coming from my bedroom. I froze in the hallway. My heart pounded so loud I thought they would hear me. I pushed the door open, and there he was, Ethan, in my bed, with Haley, my younger sister. I cannot even describe the sound that came out of me. It was not a scream, not a sob. It was something primal, something I had never heard from myself before. Ethan jumped, stuttering excuses, while Haley wrapped the sheet around her like she was the victim. "You were not supposed to be home yet," she hissed, as if I had ruined her evening. I remember grabbing the doorframe to steady myself because my legs were trembling so hard I thought I might collapse. The man I loved, the man I was about to marry, and my own sister, they tried to explain. Ethan said it just happened. Haley said they were soulmates. My parents even tried to smooth things over later, telling me love works in mysterious ways. As if I should understand, as if this betrayal was something I should accept. I packed a bag that night and left my own apartment. Ethan did not follow me. Haley did not apologize. My parents did not come after me. I thought the worst was behind me, but the universe was not done humiliating me yet. 2 weeks later, a cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox. The handwriting on the front was Haley's, bubbly and familiar. I tore it open, already bracing for what I knew it might contain. Inside was a wedding invitation, the same font I had chosen for my own invitations, the same calligraphy I had paid for, the same pearl cardstock, and tucked inside, a handwritten note from my sister. "Dearest Madison, I know this might be hard, but family should celebrate family. Come see what true love looks like. We would hate for you to miss it. Love always. Haley and Ethan." I read that note again and again until the words blurred. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Not only had she stolen my fiancé, she was using my own wedding plans as her weapon. I stood in my kitchen shaking, the invitation slipping from my fingers to the floor. For a moment I considered burning it. For another, I considered tearing it up and pretending I had never seen it. But instead, I carefully placed it back in the envelope and set it on my coffee table. I knew then that I would go to that wedding, not as a broken-hearted ex, not as the sister who had been humiliated. I would go on my terms. The days that followed were some of the darkest I had ever lived. Everywhere I went, I felt whispers behind my back. At work, people avoided eye contact. At family gatherings, relatives asked me why I had let such a good man slip away. No one asked if I was okay, but one night, sitting alone in my apartment, surrounded by half-empty takeout boxes, my phone rang. It was Mr. Whitman, my grandmother's attorney. He asked if I could come to his office the next morning. I almost said no. I almost told him I did not care about whatever paperwork he needed me to sign. But something in his voice made me agree. That meeting changed everything. Mr. Whitman showed me a small wooden box. He explained that my grandmother, the founder of Cole and Partners Architecture, had left very specific instructions in her will. The full document had been sealed for 6 months after her death. That 6 months would end on the exact day of Haley's wedding. The inheritance was staggering. $10 million in assets, patents, and real estate. But there were conditions. The heir could not be married to someone with significant debt or someone guilty of betraying family. Ethan had over $250,000 in gambling debt from trips to Las Vegas. He had even opened credit cards in my name at Bank of America. And Haley, by definition, had violated the clause about family betrayal. In that moment, I realized something extraordinary. I had been cast as the victim in their story. But in reality, I was the one holding all the cards. I walked out of Mr. Whitman's office with that wooden box clutched to my chest. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt powerful. I would attend Haley's wedding. I would walk into that cathedral in white, and I would show them what real justice looks like. What none of them knew was that the day they thought would be their victory was about to become the day everything unraveled. And that was only the beginning. I left Mr. Whitman's office that day clutching the wooden box like it was a lifeline. For the first time since Ethan and Haley betrayed me, I felt something other than pain. I felt power. The box sat on my kitchen counter that night. I ordered Chinese takeout, poured a glass of wine, and just stared at it. Inside were papers that could flip my entire life upside down. Or maybe right side up. My grandmother had been the toughest woman I ever knew. She built Cole & Partners Architecture from nothing back in the 70s when women were barely allowed in boardrooms. She did not believe in luck. She believed in patience and strategy. Now here she was, speaking to me from beyond the grave through this box. The conditions in her will were clear. The heir to her estate had to be single or married to someone financially stable and approved by her board. They could not have debts over $50,000. They could not have a record of betrayal against family. Ethan was drowning in gambling debt, more than $250,000 owed to casinos in Las Vegas. He had even opened a credit card under my name at Bank of America. I was still fighting the fraud charges. And Haley, my perfect little sister in the eyes of my parents. She had officially disqualified herself the moment she climbed into bed with my fiancé. I remember laughing that night. Not a bitter laugh, but a real one. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe karma was real. I called my best friend Jenna and told her everything. "Do not go to that wedding," she begged. "That is exactly what she wants. She wants to humiliate you." But Jenna did not know about the box. She did not know that I was finally holding all the cards. I said, "Oh, I am going." And trust me, they will never forget it. The next 2 weeks were strange. On the outside, I went through the motions. I went to work. I smiled at coworkers who whispered behind my back. I even showed up at a family dinner where my mom told me to stop being so dramatic, and my dad asked me to at least pretend to be happy for my sister. But on the inside, I was planning. I reread every page of the will until I could quote it from memory. I met with Mr. Whitman 3 times to confirm the legal details. He assured me the timing was perfect. The 6 months would be up the exact weekend of the wedding. Meanwhile, Haley was posting every detail of her wedding prep on Instagram, cake tastings, dress fittings, engagement photos on the lakefront. She even tagged the same bakery and florist I had chosen for my own wedding. Each post was like a knife, but instead of bleeding, I was sharpening my resolve. One night, Ethan called me. I almost did not answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Madison, I can explain," he started. I cut him off. "Save it. I just want to know if you are happy with your choice." There was silence. Then he asked, "What do you mean?" I said, $10 million. I hope she is worth it." And then I hung up. I knew those words would haunt him. Men like Ethan always thought they were the smartest in the room. I wanted him to lose sleep wondering what I meant. The closer the wedding got, the bolder my family became. My mom showed up at my apartment one morning in her Chanel suit. She actually pulled out a checkbook. "How much will it take for you not to show up?" she asked. I laughed right in her face. "Keep your money, Mom. You are going to need it." Her face turned pale. A day later, my dad called me. He said the family company needed the wedding to go smoothly because Ethan's parents might invest. He told me to stop being selfish. Selfish, that word echoed in my head. I had spent 30 years being the bigger person, letting Haley steal my boyfriends, my spotlight, even my internships. And now they wanted me to let her steal my fiancé too. Not this time. The night before the wedding, my parents and Aunt Carol ambushed me at my apartment. They said I was going to ruin everything. They begged. They threatened. They guilted me. I smiled through the whole thing, because what they did not know was that by the next afternoon, I would no longer be the forgotten daughter. I would be the CEO of a company worth millions. As I closed the door behind them, I looked at the white Vera Wang dress hanging in my closet. The dress I had bought for my own wedding. Tomorrow, it would not be wasted. Tomorrow, it would be my armor. And that was the moment I realized the wedding was not just Haley's big day, it was mine. Because what happened the next afternoon made the entire cathedral gasp in disbelief. The morning of the wedding felt strange. I woke up earlier than usual, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at the white dress hanging on my closet door. The same dress I had bought for my own wedding. Now it was about to become my weapon. I took a long shower, did my hair in soft waves, and slipped into the dress. The fabric hugged my body perfectly, and for the first time in months, I felt powerful again. I slid on my Jimmy Choos, grabbed the wooden box with my grandmother's will, and headed out the door. The ride to St. Matthew's Cathedral felt like a scene from a movie. The city buzzed as if nothing unusual was happening, while inside my chest, my heart pounded like a drum. When I arrived, the cathedral bells were ringing. Guests were already milling around the entrance, holding programs, snapping selfies, sipping champagne. The moment I stepped out of the Uber, conversations stopped, heads turned, whispers spread like wildfire. Is that Madison? Why is she wearing white? Oh my God, she looks like a bride. I walked past them, chin high, clutching the pearl invitation that said 2 o'clock. My heels clicked against the stone walkway. With every step, the whispers grew louder. Inside the cathedral, the atmosphere was even heavier. Stained glass windows painted the floor with streaks of color. 200 people turned their heads as I walked down the aisle. The organist faltered on a note. I slipped into a pew near the back. I could see everything from there. My parents sat in the front row. My mom turned around, her eyes wide like she had just seen a ghost. My dad's jaw was so tight I thought his teeth might crack. And there they were at the altar, Haley, glowing in ivory lace with a crown of white roses. Ethan beside her, wearing the same tuxedo he had picked out with me last year. Our eyes met, his face drained of color. For a moment, the world went quiet. Then the whispers started again. People pulled out their phones. Some pretended to cough just to cover their gasps. Haley leaned toward Ethan, whispering furiously. Even from where I sat, I could see the tension in her shoulders. Good, I thought. Let her squirm. The wedding coordinator rushed toward me, flustered. Miss Cole, you should not be here. My invitation says 2 o'clock. I said calmly, holding up the pearl card. I am right on time. I crossed my legs and folded my hands elegantly, as if I was the guest of honor. The music swelled, trying to cover the chaos. Father Michael cleared his throat and tried to restore order. But the tension was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. I could feel the eyes of every guest on me. Some pitied me. Some judged me. Some were dying for drama. I sat tall, letting the light from the stained glass hit the pearls on my dress, making me shimmer with each breath. Haley's smile was slipping. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. My parents looked ready to explode. And still, I waited. As the bridesmaids walked down the aisle, I noticed the details. The flowers were the exact ones I had chosen. The string quartet played the same arrangement I had picked. Even the cake displayed in the reception hall was from my favorite bakery. It was like watching my own wedding play out in front of me, only with the wrong bride and groom. Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Another part of me burned with fury. When Haley finally started her walk down the aisle, the room stood up, phones raised high. Guests whispered compliments. She looked radiant, sure, but I could see her jaw tightening every time she glanced my way. And Ethan, he looked like a man walking toward his own funeral. The ceremony began. Father Michael spoke about love, honesty, and trust. His words echoed through the cathedral. But all I heard was the pounding of my own heart. Haley's eyes flicked toward me with every sentence. She was daring me to react, but I did not flinch. I sat perfectly still, waiting for the line I knew was coming. If anyone here knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The air in the cathedral froze. 200 guests held their breath. Haley turned her head slightly, smirking, as if to say, "I dare you." And I smiled back because she had no idea what was about to happen next. The moment I stood up, the entire cathedral gasped. Every head turned in my direction. The sound of 200 people inhaling at once is something you do not forget. Father Michael froze mid-sentence. Ethan's face went white. Haley's bouquet shook in her hands. I walked slowly down the aisle, each step echoing against the marble floor. My dress shimmered in the colored light from the stained glass windows. I stopped at the front, just a few feet from the bride and groom. "I object." My voice rang out clear, sharper than the organ music that had gone silent. Father Michael blinked. "I beg your pardon," I said again. "I object, on legal grounds." The whispers turned into a low roar. People craned their necks to see better. Phones were held high, recording every second. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the small wooden box, the same one Mr. Whitman had handed me 2 weeks earlier. This box contains documents that materially affect this union. Father Michael hesitated, clearly unsure of what to do. Before he could respond, a man stood from the 5th row. Mr. Whitman himself. "I am the attorney for the Anderson estate," he said firmly. "These documents are legally binding and time-sensitive." He walked forward and placed the papers in Father Michael's hands. Haley's face twisted. "This is ridiculous. You cannot just interrupt my wedding." "Actually, I can," I said, turning to face her and Ethan. 6 months ago, our grandmother passed away. What none of you knew is that she left behind a will with very specific conditions. Haley hissed through clenched teeth. "You are lying." Mr. Whitman cleared his throat. "The preliminary will was read months ago. This is the full documentation that was sealed for 6 months per Mrs. Cole's explicit instructions." The crowd erupted again. Guests whispered to each other. Some gasped, some laughed in disbelief. Father Michael's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. His eyes widened. "This says," he stammered, "the entire Cole estate, valued at $10 million, is left to Madison Cole, conditional upon her marital status." Gasps filled the cathedral. Ethan swayed on his feet. Haley's jaw dropped. "It further states," Father Michael continued, "that any family member who marries someone with debts exceeding $50,000 forfeits all claims." I turned to Ethan. "How much debt do you have?" "Last count was over $250,000. "Right. Plus the credit cards you opened in my name." The guests erupted. People actually stood up, shouting. Someone yelled, "Are you serious?" Ethan's lips moved, but no sound came out. He looked like a man about to faint. And furthermore, Father Michael read, "Any family member who engages in betrayal with an engaged partner is permanently excluded from inheritance." The silence that followed was suffocating. Haley's face turned red, then white, then almost gray. She clutched Ethan's arm like he could save her. Ethan pulled away, his eyes darting around the room like he was searching for an escape. "You knew about this," Haley whispered to me, her voice shaking. I smiled. "I found out 2 weeks ago, right after you sent me that lovely invitation asking me to come see what true love looks like." Laughter rippled through the pews. Some guests actually clapped. Ethan finally spoke, his voice desperate. "This is fraud. You cannot do this." Whitman fixed his gaze on him. "Opening credit cards in someone else's name is fraud. Madison has chosen not to press charges yet. Phones recorded every second. Hashtags were already being typed." Haley's mascara was starting to run. She shook her head in disbelief. "No, this is my wedding. This is supposed to be my perfect day." I tilted my head. "Funny, it looks more like your downfall." My parents rushed forward then, trying to take control. My mom shouted that I was ruining everything. My dad tried to claim the company was his to run, but Mr. Whitman handed over another document. Mrs. Cole retained 78% ownership through trusts and holding companies. Your position as acting president is terminated. Effective immediately. The cathedral exploded into chaos. Some guests gasped, others cheered. Haley screamed. Ethan tried to run. And in that moment, I knew this was not just a wedding anymore. It was the end of their fairy tale and the beginning of my story. The cathedral exploded. It was like someone had dropped a bomb in the middle of the ceremony. Guests gasped, shouted, some even stood on pews to get a better view. Dozens of phones were out. I could see the red recording dots glowing like fireflies in the dark. Haley turned on Ethan, her voice shrill and breaking. "You lied to me. You told me you had investments. You told me you were building a future." Ethan grabbed her hands, desperate. "I never lied. I just did not tell you everything. We can work this out." She yanked away from him. "Work what out? You are broke. You are a liar. You used me to get to the money." Her mascara was streaming down her face, her perfect bridal look crumbling in real time. Ethan's eyes darted wildly. He looked like a trapped animal. The guests ate it up. Some laughed. Some gasped dramatically. Some whispered. "This is better than reality TV." One of the groomsmen tried to step in, but Haley shoved him away. "You knew about this," she screamed at Ethan. "You knew and you still chose me." Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His silence was louder than any answer. Haley staggered back, clutching her bouquet like it could anchor her. Then she hurled it at him. It hit his chest and fell to the ground in a mess of crushed roses. My parents rushed forward then, trying to salvage something. My mom raised her voice above the chaos. "Everyone, please calm down. This is a family matter." Richard Brennan, a major client of the company, stood and cut her off. "Is it true your husband has been running a company he does not actually own?" The color drained from my dad's face. "That is preposterous." He barked. But Mr. Whitman stepped in, holding up another document. "Actually, Mr. Cole, we have proof that you took out several loans against assets you never owned. That is fraud. The board of directors will be pursuing legal action." The silence after that was deafening. Even Haley and Ethan stopped arguing for a moment. My dad sputtered, turning purple. "You cannot just fire me. I am the president. You were the president." Mrs. Chen from the board said calmly, "Effective immediately. Madison is CEO." Gasps and murmurs swept the room again. My heart pounded, but I kept my face calm. This was it. The moment everything changed. Ethan's parents backed away from the altar, their faces pale with humiliation. They had bragged for months about their son marrying into money. Now they realized they were inheriting nothing but debt. The organist closed his sheet music. The wedding coordinator was crying in the corner. The photographer kept snapping photos like his career depended on it. Haley screamed again, her voice raw. "This is not over. I will contest this." I tilted my head. "With what money? You just quit your job to plan this wedding. Ethan is drowning in debt. Mom and Dad are facing fraud charges, and you signed a prenup." Her face crumpled. She whispered, barely audible, "What prenup?" Ethan's head whipped toward her. "You signed it. Remember, it protects my assets." Haley laughed bitterly, the sound broken. "What assets? Ethan, your debt." The crowd erupted again. Laughter, gasps, whispers, phones raised even higher. It was a public collapse in real time. Haley dropped to her knees on the altar steps, sobbing. Ethan turned, trying to storm out, but 2 police officers were waiting near the doors. Mayor Whitman had planned ahead. They stopped him gently but firmly. "We just need to ask you a few questions about the fraudulent credit cards," one officer said calmly. Ethan shouted, "This is entrapment." "She set me up." "You set yourself up," the officer replied. The guests roared again. Some clapped, some shouted insults, others filmed every second. I just stood there, calm in the eye of the storm, my grandmother's will safely back in my clutch. For the first time in my life, I was not the forgotten sister. I was not the quiet one in the corner. I was the woman who had turned a wedding into a reckoning. My parents argued with Mr. Whitman and the board members. Haley sobbed on the floor. Ethan shouted at the police. Guests whispered and laughed. And me, I turned and walked slowly back down the aisle, every eye following me. It felt like the longest, most triumphant walk of my life. The wedding was over, but the real fallout had only just begun. By the next morning, the internet had already done its job. Clips from the wedding were everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, you name it. One video titled "Bride's Sister Objects" with $10 million will hit 1 million views in less than 12 hours. Another showed Ethan yelling at the police while Haley screamed on the altar. Comments poured in. The cheater got exactly what he deserved. Grandma playing chess from beyond the grave. Imagine fumbling 10 million for a broke liar. My phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, old coworkers, even strangers reaching out to say thank you for standing up for myself. Some said my story gave them courage to face their own betrayals. That was when I realized this was bigger than me. Ethan disappeared. His social media went dark. Rumor had it he moved back into his parents' house in Connecticut. The fraud charges were still hanging over him. Restitution would follow him for years. Haley deleted almost every post on her Instagram, the page where she had documented every moment of wedding planning. Every dress fitting, every cake tasting, had become a graveyard of deleted photos. Comments that survived were brutal. People told her she got exactly what she deserved. Others called her selfish. Some even said watching her collapse at the altar was the most satisfying thing they had ever seen. My parents tried to reach me. My mom called over and over. My dad sent long emails about family unity and forgiveness, but I ignored most of them, because for the first time in my life, I understood something my grandmother had always tried to teach me. Being kind does not mean being weak. Being patient does not mean being a doormat. Sometimes silence is not strength. Sometimes you have to stand up, even if your voice shakes. The board made everything official the following week. I was named CEO of Cole & Associates. Clients who had once ignored me now requested me by name. We landed contracts worth millions. For the first time, my work was not overshadowed by family drama or my sister's spotlight. It was seen and respected for what it was. Haley eventually got a job at a coffee shop. My mom said she was also taking night classes at community college. Maybe she would finally learn about responsibility. Maybe not. That was no longer my battle. My dad's career was over, his reputation destroyed by his own decisions. He tried consulting for a small firm, but no one really trusted him again. And me, I was finally free. I moved into my grandmother's old house overlooking the lake. Her portrait hung in my office, watching over me as I built the legacy she had started. Sometimes I spoke to it, telling her about new contracts and challenges. You were right, Grandma. Patience really is power. 6 months later, I received a letter from Haley. She wrote that therapy had forced her to take accountability. She admitted she had been cruel, that she took everything from me out of jealousy, that Marcus was never about love, just about winning. She said she was trying to be better, not for me, not for our parents, but for herself. I read it 3 times and then tucked it away. Maybe one day we would talk, maybe not, but for now, boundaries were more important than bridges. Looking back, I realized the worst year of my life had become the turning point. If I had married Ethan, I would have lost everything. If I had stayed quiet, I would have been erased. But by standing up, I took back my life, my future, and my voice. So here is what I want you to take away from my story. If someone betrays you, you do not have to get even, but you do have to get strong. If someone tries to take what is yours, you do not have to fight with fists. Sometimes the best revenge is patience, preparation, and proof. And if your own family does not see your worth, it does not mean you do not have any. It means you have to believe in yourself even more. I turned betrayal into triumph without throwing a punch, without screaming, without losing myself. I did it with patience, with documents, and with perfect timing. What about you? What would you have done in my place? Would you have gone to the wedding? Would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have stood up in front of 200 people and spoken the truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear your perspective. And if my story gave you something to think about, do me a favor, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more stories of quiet victories and unexpected comebacks. Because at the end of the day, the best revenge is not revenge at all. It is living well.